Okay, so good afternoon, all the participants, and thank you very much for joining
Good afternoon.
this webinar on the state of fashion at this point of time. A lot of us who are in the fashion industry have been hit the worst, largely because of the fact that we've got malls closed, stores closed, staff who are there working continuously from their homes, but not really working because there is no work in the stores. And this particular event is a very unique event because what we are also seeing is that unlike most other economic crises, this is a crisis where we've got a health crisis first of all, and then an economic crisis which is following a health crisis. And in the context of both of these coming together, unlike what happened in 2008-9, there is a lot of uncertainty in terms of how the market will pan out in the coming months and years. Uh, so what we have today is a panel comprising of some of the veterans of the fashion industry, both domestic and international brands, menswear and women's wear, ethnic and Western. We have with us today Vineet Gautam, who's the CEO and country head of Bestseller. We have
Hi, hi
Hi,
Bijou.
Vineet. We have Shailesh Chaturvedi, who's the CEO and MD of Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. Hi, Shailesh, how are you?
Hi, I work on Arrow brand also, so my Arrow team should not be mad about that.
Okay, sorry, we missed out on the Arrow business. And then we have Amrish Kumar from Ritu Kumar. Hi, Amrish, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon.
And
Hi.
ethnic brands in India. Hi, Dalkar.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Their own views about what's happening in the fashion industry. And then after that is over, what we'd like to do is to be able to address a set of questions to the panelists. I have received almost about 170 questions so far from various participants on this webinar, and we'll try and cover a lot of those questions in the open session, which is at the end. But a lot of those questions have anyway been addressed in the larger thematic questions that we have decided and discussed as far as the panel itself is concerned. So may I start with Shailesh, who's on my right, to just give us a short understanding of how you see this entire pandemic and the impact of it on the fashion industry in a very short time.
Bijou, let me structure it in two ways. One is there is a issue of life ahead, and there is an issue of livelihood. So we are talking about health of the people, the team, the country, our customers, and how this pandemic is affecting, creating insecurity. And other is what the impact on the livelihood, on the businesses, on the economic side. And also the other way to structure it is in the short term. We always bother right now about 100 days ending June. Medium term, what happens to this season, Diwali, what happens to weddings this year, and our response when the lockdown gets over. So these are all sort of medium term impact and responses. And the long term, I believe our industry is suffering from commoditization in fashion, and what this will impact that, and how we need to do 2 or 3 things that I have in my mind to fight that issue of commoditization with this COVID impact. So on the short term, we need to first, our response is about the health of the team. I've spoken to a lot of my people our colleagues in Asia Pac, and good news is that many large countries, there was not even one employee got affected with COVID because of the stringent social distancing, hygiene. There's a lot of learning from there to make sure that our stores, our teams are not impacted, because I think we need to assure safety, environment of safety to our customers before they start coming into the malls, online, offline, delivery, etc. That's one side. We need to take care of our team. Second side is we need to take care of the business. And, right now in my businesses, for last more than a month, sale is zero, collection is zero, but we still have a, business to run. We have expenses, we have mall rentals, we have to pay for the import of goods or production of goods. So we are like really challenged on the cash flow. So to me, in the short run till end of June, it's all about taking care of the team and taking care of the cash flow, Bijou.
Okay, thanks, Shailesh. And Since you've spoken about people, I'm sure Vineet will have a slightly different view in terms of what are some of the challenges that he's facing and how does he foresee this. So, Vineet, could you give us a short intro into this?
Yeah, hi everyone. I think the pandemic actually hit us completely out of the box, and I think no one expected this to come in. And actually, in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks, actually the entire world got hit. And I'll give you an example. We run businesses across the globe, and we had 7,000 stores shut in China when the pandemic hit China. So I think we saw a lot of that coming from data and a lot of learning coming from there. But obviously, every country has reacted differently, and it was very tough to foresee that India will shut 1.3 billion people and lock them down. One-sixth of the world's population is said to be locked down in India. So I think the first and foremost, I think Shailesh was absolutely right in saying the first thing is our employees and our customers. And I think we shut down our stores across. We have 3,500 odd colleagues across the country who work for Bestseller and their brands. So we shut the entire stores up. We moved everyone to work from home. We have a large, good IT infrastructure, so which allowed us to really remotely still work. I think the major things which we all need to look at it from is from two folds. One is what to do now, and I think what to do for future. And I think what the pandemic shutdown has allowed us to is to relook at the entire business by itself. And I think sometimes you don't get time during the when the business is completely up running to look at many aspects. So I think currently this allows us to relook at our business plans for this year. One is mandatory because we are forcing few weeks of shutdown, and then as the shutdown opens up, we don't foresee demand coming up immediately. So I think how do we plan for that, and how do we overall look at from a business perspective? I foresee about 9 to 12 months to normalcy to return, and I think that's what we are trying to really look at how our business can be managed during these times. Cash is going to be the most important part, and safety the next. So I think both of the things have to be looked in by business leaders and managers across board. Not in our industry, but across the industries, it's the same challenge. Fashion has a relatively little more challenge because the product starts to get aged very, very quickly, and especially brands which run fast fashion retail like us are the one who are continuously seeing product getting older in the stores or lying in our warehouses. So we need to really pan this across and see what product is relevant. How do we foresee when we open up, what to liquidate, what to carry forward, and how do you continuously manage this entire fashion value chain? Because the entire supply chain is disrupted. Our factories are shut. Suppliers to the factories are also shut. So we need to continuously look at a broader supply chain backbone of ours and see how can we bring normalcy in next 3 to 6 months to our business. And I think so that's what I think the pandemic has pushed us to relook at.
Good. Thanks, Vineet. Thank you. Amrish, if I may just dwell on the same point with you. You're an ethnic brand, a designer brand born out of India, and you work with a lot of artisans, and we've seen the huge challenges in terms of managing migrant labor in their places of work. So how do you see this, in a short summary, as affecting you when you look at the business?
Um, thanks for the introduction, Bijou. I'm not going to belabor what both Vineet and Shailesh have said. Everything they've said, I think, holds true for pretty much the entire industry. With respect to what changes, I'm going in with a proviso that once we do start up again, there will be a gradual startup, and then over a period of time, things will get back to some kind of normalcy, at least normalcy that we are used to. And by that, I mean that we don't have another um, inflection of the virus coming in, and other sort of supply side um, shutdowns, etc., don't happen. Now, going in with that, I think there are a couple of structural changes that will happen within the industry. And this will precipitate it in a way that very little else could have done. One on the cost side, and the other will be on the demand side. On the cost side, I think it's already very evident that in terms of fixed costs of retail, and specifically apparel retail, things are going to change structurally. Whether it's the kind of the manner in which we pay rents and the types of rents we pay, or the magnitude of those, the various verticals of our other cost structures, whether it's manpower and what have you, I think we are going to now see a significant change in the cost paradigm of our business. And this will also include, some element of moving over to the online businesses, and what then does shift online and what remains in its more traditional form. On the demand side, it's less evident what's going to happen. It's a little bit of guesswork. I mean, of course, we can all educated people, and we all industry veterans, we can all have educated guesses as to what's going to happen, um, whether it's about the wedding market or it's about the market as a whole. I mean, we've all got our projections. We can look at what's happening in China, etc. But that is still a little less evident. So just to answer your question, I think one thing that's going to change significantly is on the cost side, and we'll see what happens demand side after.
And then coming to you, Dalpat, I think from Maniva's perspective, I know that you do a lot of insourcing in terms of manufacturing. There's very little which is made outside. And for you, when you talk about closure, it's about closure of manufacturing, it's about closure of retail stores. So how do you see this, the pandemic and the entire impact on your business in terms of us mobilizing the people, whenever we are open? And the second part of it is in ensuring that you're able to scale up depending on how the market scales up for you.
So, Bijou, I think other panelists have very well put it across. For us as a retailer and apparel manufacturer, we are in between the people, right? We are dependent on people and we are with the people. Pandemic has hit the common public, and that is where we have got badly hit as the businesses have got shut. Now, there are three phases of our transition plan. One is the short term, where we have to take care of our people, be it in the manufacturing, be it in the corporate office, in the warehouse, and in the retail stores. As a company, principally, we have taken a stand that we will safeguard our workers completely. We will ensure that their livelihood is not impacted in this period. For the consumer safety, as other panelists have already spoken about, all the security norms to shut down with the sanitization methods and to protect the inventory, whatever safeguards had to be taken, were taken and they were shut down. Main challenge will be the changes which will be there on the cost side, demand side. The third change which will happen in how we as retailers service our consumers. I think the hangover of this corona is going to remain for some time after the lift up of the entire lockdown. I foresee this continuing for at least 12 to 15 months till the time vaccine is discovered. And in this period, the way we service our consumers is going to change. One is online. Obviously, the mode of delivery through online will become a significant part.
So Dalpat, we'll come to that
right.
in a little more detail subsequently. Yeah,
exactly.
But
so that is what
your point is about
first.
The fact that you're going to be preserving employment, making sure that those who work for you don't suffer, they're kept safe,
exactly,
and you're going to be able to manage that part very well. So let me just swing to Vineet. And you mentioned about 3,500 people in stores in India. What are those people doing now at this point of time, and when the whole country is actually locked down and stores are closed? What are you doing with them? Are you still keeping them on your rolls? Are you reducing some salaries? Are you making sure that they're gainfully employed? Are you skilling them to make sure that they gain something? Are they working remotely to ensure that your planning for the subsequent season is in place? So what exactly are you doing with these people?
Out of the 3,500, I'll put them in two parts. One is store employees, and the other is people who are in the back end of the business. From a store employee perspective, I think a major part which we are currently doing is engaging with them, and I think it's a good opportunity to also upscale. So we are using a lot of time to upscale our current people in the business. I think we never get time like this, and I think today technology helps us reach everyone, and we are able to train and upskill them. Also, I think we every day on a daily basis do a health checkup where we are able to take feedback from them on how they are feeling and if there's any help that we can provide them. So I think the major part in the store part is engagement, and I think upscaling them for getting ready for this whenever we open. On the back end side, I think we can look at a few people. One are people who are currently looking at business, and we are now looking at life beyond the lockdown and how do we plan and what numbers to look at, what to look at from a supply chain cost perspective. So obviously a full revised business plan is being made and we are working on multiple scenarios because, as Amrish said, it's a guesswork currently. The good part is that we are able to get a lot of data insight from China because we run 7,000 stores in China. Europe opened up partly in the last few days, and we are able to see some uptrends coming from there. So basis that we have made some scenarios on which we are working. The other part is that there are people who need to be upskilled, and again, from a head office perspective or a back end perspective, also we are doing a lot of training, a lot of upskilling of the employees is happening currently, and I think it allows us to also cross train people, which you are not able to do during when the business is up and running completely. So I think we're taking this opportunity as a time where we can engage, upskill our people, and also relook at our business model and our business plan for next year. Yes, we are keeping everyone currently on rolls. We have not let go of a single person. I think our first responsibility is to protect jobs till the time we can manage to, and that's what we are trying to do. That the least impact comes to our people. But yes, cash flows are really challenged. There's no revenue. Unlike Europe and other parts where online was operational and some revenue was coming in, we are not seeing any revenue because even e-commerce here has been shut down. So I think the government needs to, and I think you have that maybe in a subsequent question, the government needs to work on some mechanism to allow companies to get some cash flow in, because otherwise we are heading to a very, very challenging times in business where there is no cash coming in, but there is continuous cash outflow in the business. And yes, we have responsibility towards people, and we are ensuring that we can fulfill that to the best we can.
Thanks, Vineet. And I think what you're saying very clearly is that we have a responsibility to our people. We're going to preserve employment. We're going to make sure that they're going to be, kept skilled. They're going to be kept engaged and continue to work from wherever their locations are. And I think, that's a good thought to be able to share with the larger team of people who are larger team of participants that, we are actually looking at being able to preserve employment and add value to the people during this particular 40-day period. Let me swing to you, Shailesh, because you've got brands where the lead times are pretty long. What we are seeing is that almost half of the spring-summer season has actually got wiped out in the course of this particular lockdown. You're also seeing a situation where, when you come back, and that's sometime hopefully in the month of May, while 3rd of May, but we don't really know what's going to happen after that, and what are the restrictions which are going to be there. You've got to contend with the inventory which is in the stores. You've got to contend with the inventory which is on tap, which your suppliers had made for you and either shipped and are lying in warehouses or are lying at suppliers' ends itself. You've got to figure out what to do with this inventory in the short season which is left behind. You've got to think about planning for the autumn winter season, where typically we look at introducing stuff again back sometime in the months of July and August. So how do you this is one of the key parts of the apparel business, which is how do you manage the inventory for the season, and the success of that actually determines the success of any apparel company. So how do you look at this when you think about the problems that you have on
hand? Bijou, inventory is the heart of the business model here in our industry. While we are very committed to take care of our people, we also have to be committed to taking care of the business also. We should not shy away from saying in a forum like this that we need to take care of our businesses. They don't fold. We need to take care of the long-term interest of our shareholders, etc. So, if you really look at from a business side of it, cash flow is key. And, I can share my own company's cash flows. Almost 50% of the checks that we write are for inventory some way, whether we are importing inventory, paying for insurance and freight, paying for custom duty, or in India, paying to the vendor to bring in goods. So it's a very large part of our cash flow. And today, for 100-day plan, cash flow is the central idea to protect cash flows. So inventory becomes very, very important. Now, and also is the biggest challenge. Let me upfront say that, because our industry, we work on a 9-month cycle. We commit to the inventory in advance, and something like this, which is completely unexpected, puts a spin, which is like roller coaster ride for us going forward on inventory. Now, what we will do is, let me say that we will try a lot of things and I'll discuss some of the things, but it's something going to be a big challenge for the industry and for us for sure. So what we're doing is the good. See, we have spring summer goods, we have the winter goods, and in between in our system we call pre-fall, which is early season, which is still not that cold. So what happens is that we have 3-4 objectives. There's objective of cash flow, the objective of freshness. We don't want consumer to get wrong season, so you have to be fresh and you have to be season right. You can't sell half sleeve shirts in winter and you can't sell black outerwear in March, right? So we need to take care of all these sort of parameters right for our business. So we will push some of the spring summer goods into in India. It's still summer to summer, so after end of season sale, when you go to July, August, September, it's still India going from summer to summer. So we are that way lucky that we are not moving from summer to sort of a chilly fall, but we are moving here from summer to summer. So we can take some part of our summer goods into early fall season in India before Diwali. Also this year Diwali is a little late. It's middle November, unlike typically where it happens end of October. So we will still have some more weeks to sell summerish lightweight products before the festival, the colorful Diwali merchandise is required, and then the winter merchandise comes. So we will use some of the spring summer goods into the pre-fall season. We will use some pre-fall goods as we intended, and we will cut part of our fall pre-fall goods. We will cut production of some of our fall holiday goods, and this whole cycle will only get normalized by spring summer 21 season, because we lost almost like 1.5 months, and that's a lot of sell through, and we cannot consume that in the remaining part. We don't know the demand side, what's going to happen. So the way we are looking at it is that we will start sort of rolling out with all these parameters of freshness, season right, and cash flow management. We'll start rolling the goods so that things on the inventory side might get stabilized by Feb, March. Of course, we will need higher holding power. We need a little more ammunition on the banking side so that we can hold extra inventory. Because sometimes you can panic and then give too much of discount and spoil the market. That's not the good idea. That's also a variable that we don't want to just the brand to be on the market and panic. And a lot of people who don't have holding power will panic probably. But we need to also make sure that we are there for long term. We are not going to fold up. We don't need to do panic and spoil the brand that we have built with so much of heart and love. So that is something we will do. Hold it, cut it, take it to the next season, and hopefully get normalized by Feb, March 21.
So if I were to swing the same question to you, Amrish, because I think you're also a brand which is epitomized by the designs that you create, and you've got a large part of your fortunes typically riding on the winter season, which is where the heavier fabrics, the more elaborate dresses, all of that really come into play. So how do you see this challenge that you're facing when you're stuck in the months of March and April with an uncertain consumer sentiment in May and onwards, and you having to manage between, say, your lighter fabrics spring summer to your heavier fabrics winter collection? How do you see this challenge?
So we have 3 brands. They range from, the top end is the brand that's catering to the bridal market and to the sort of high end occasion wear market. And then to the bottom, we have a Ritu Kumar brand, which is your ethnic and modern ethnic brand. And then you've got Label, which is your Western young brand. So each of them have slightly different challenges. Similar to what Shailesh is saying, I think the pattern that we follow in India seasonally, actually the season in terms of fabrics and weight, etc., really only begins to change in October. So prior to that, there is a little bit of buffer that we all have of the summer merchandise that may not have been seen yet, that could be soaked up with the months that will precede the opening up of the market. So a little bit of that will happen. What we did is, our supply chains are quite just in time, in the sense that we get it out of production and put it into the shop simultaneously. We do most of our own production and sourcing, so that helped us, because early March, when we saw what was beginning to happen in the malls and with customer sentiment, we essentially held everything that we were going to be manufacturing. So we've got a certain amount of stock that is on overhang from the first quarter leading up to March, but subsequently we managed to hold on to our production. So what we anticipate is the certain amount of what we had produced is going to get soaked up when we start up again. We will definitely need some freshness. So as soon as we start, we'll have to be smart about what are the styles, what are the collections that we do put into work. Obviously, it's not going to be the same magnitude as business as usual. Similarly, the real change in the season around October, we have pared down our orders. And again, honestly, every week we are relooking at what the orders are looking like, when we are likely to reopen, and this is going to carry on happening. And I don't think we're going to finalize the total orders till we have a sense of what's happening in the market. So there's going to be a lot of waiting and watching and being as quick as we can on the supply side to manage the inventory issue. But yeah, it's going to be an issue. There's going to be some more liquidation than we would have liked. The realized value of some of the stock is going to be lower than what we've all forecasted. But I think what helps is if you have nimble supply chains. If you have that, then hopefully you can turn things around quickly. Like Shailesh, we have some amount of our product, and Vineet, some of our product is imported, and this is specifically the winter product. So for that, I think we'll just have to be conservative, and that's the way we'll have to take it.
Okay, thanks. So the message I'm getting from both of you is that the situation is very fluid. The only thing that you can manage is that you've got inventory on hand, and we've got to figure out how that inventory on hand plays out over a period of time. We've got to figure out how to make sure that we retain freshness in the collection. So it can't be just about selling all the stuff that you currently have. So there is a need to be able to introduce new product. And the big test will come in October when the festival season starts. And by which time, a triangulation of both the consumer sentiment, market opening up, and new product arrivals will hopefully be able to give us some boost in terms of fortunes. So that's roughly what I seem to gather from both what you and Shailesh have mentioned. Dalpat, now let me just swing to a point which a lot of the retail industry is talking about. We all have stores closed. We have expenses that we are incurring. Depending on the company, our availability of cash, how well capitalized we are, and the amount of cash that we are sitting on also varies. Being in the fashion industry, one of the big challenges that we have is fixed costs to revenues are obviously much higher than, say, maybe the food industry, primarily because we operate with better operating margins. And that allows us to be able to incur this, which is all very good as long as you're selling regularly. But when you're in a lockdown situation and you don't have revenues, this comes back to bite you. So one of the conclusions in the retail industry has been about how do we preserve cash? How do we ensure that we actually have cash on our hands to be able to take into account our current costs, plus also the uncertainties in the future? And I think Amrish alluded to that a little earlier when he talked about both the supply and the demand side. But what I'd like to hear from you is in terms of what are the kind of things that you think we should be doing in order to be able to address that problem. Incidentally, this is one question which amongst 170 odd questions that I've received is probably about 30% of those questions relate to this one point.
In fact, Bijou, this is the most prominent question in the minds of everyone, how to survive and pass through this phase by preserving the cash, because that's key. And that is what I heard from all the panelists. As a CFO, that's the key task which I have been working on for last a month or so. What we are doing as a company, we are reviewing each and every element of the cost, because fixed cost, as you mentioned rightly, is very high in the retail business. We are reviewing each and every element to see if there are any bad costs which can be cut. Now, there are three parts of the cost we do in our business. One, which gets adjusted with the revenue itself. Second, which gets based on the utilization, like electricity cost, usage of the AMCs, housekeeping services, etc. So some of them, we are working with the partners to ensure that we can convert them into variable. The largest cost element which is facing the entire industry today is the lease cost. And there, we as an industry are working together to ensure that we can arrive at a win-win solution with our partners. And that's the I would say 60 to 70% of the time and the focus of the management right now is going on ensuring how do we bring least cost in control and make it a variable model. So in terms of priority to preserve cash, one, we had some build up based on the last accruals. We are also ensuring that our bank lines are active. We are talking to all the bankers and testing the facility, the lines by utilizing a small amount out of that, so that we have cash on the balance sheet. And second, we are trying to reduce it, the monthly burn, by making the fixed cost into variable as long as we can do.
Sure. So what I'm hearing from you is that you know, at the end of the day, if I look at it from a P&L perspective, the two largest components of cost tend to be lease costs and
Yeah.
the people costs.
People
When
cost.
you look at it from an operating perspective, leave aside the capital side, where inventory can become a large part of the cost. And on the lease costs, obviously, there are challenges, but we need to try and make sure that the lease costs are reduced to a level which reflects the ability of the business to pay. So whether you call it
Exactly.
revenue share, whether you call it a reduction on rent, etc. So all of that is something that we should try and do. And the second part of it is in terms of what we've heard from the panel so far about people cost has been that as of now, we are trying to look at how to preserve people costs. But on the other hand, as we go along and we look at how the business scales up, then we will get a better understanding of how people costs will have to pan out. And I think I did hear Shailesh allude to it when he talked about the fact that there will have to be an equitable sharing of the
Yep.
pain ultimately, because we've got to get the business to survive. So without a business, obviously, there is no livelihood. So, to that extent, while you're preserving livelihoods, you also have to make sure that you preserve the business. Otherwise, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So, cash and the preservation of cash, which is in terms of pulling out as much as possible from the banks, making sure that you have it on hand, making sure that you preserve it when you look at an uncertain future, making sure that you're able to differentiate between good and bad costs, as you were mentioning, and shun all the bad costs. And at least as far as the good costs are concerned, look at how to be able to rationalize it in line with the business are the key elements of what I think you've just mentioned. Uh, the other thing that I wanted to just go back again to Vineet, and he's got 3,500 people uh, on the on the rolls in the stores. And when you really look at it, this Vineet, in terms of you have a May 3rd opening date which has been signaled by the government, but that of course is also an April 20th opening date, which has actually got pushed forward. So when you really look at it, what exactly are you envisaging in terms of the opening? Because as much as you prepare for what is currently happening, which is lockdown, how do you prepare for the opening? I mean, how do you see it from, do you open all stores together? Do you open some stores? Will you work all shifts together? Will you restrict shifts? Will you get all your people to come into stores? What are the kind of measures that you need to try to make sure that protecting customers as well as protecting employees? And how do you get your warehouses to mobilize in terms of moving stuff, all of that stuff? It's not easy. It's very easy to close one day, but when you want to open, it takes many days to actually open. So how do you think of this?
I think the first thing is that yes, the current lockdown is till 3rd May, and as the government has planned up with hotspots and green zones and red zones, and depending, so I don't think on 3rd or 4th of May all stores are going to open together. I really doubt that because the current situation is still not stable. We're not going down with the cases, so I think the stores will open in bits and pieces. Also, the warehouse might be just get operational a little bit before, because Maharashtra has allowed us to now open the warehouses in some part of Maharashtra where, like Bhiwandi, I think the warehouses are getting opened in next 1 or 2 days. We also trying to open up and operationalize the warehouse. So I think as we shut down on one day, we're not going to open one day. So it is going to be a structured opening. Also, I think the most paramount thing to be really looked at now is to plan of how do we work in the new post-COVID regime, which is about how to still manage social distancing, because this is going to remain for a while. I think Dalpat also said that is, and Amrish, that this is going to be a new norm. And I think we're seeing that. So I think how do we operationalize our stores? How do we improve the obviously we have to also look at more disinfecting the stores. We are in garments business where consumers are also using garments. How do we ensure that the hygiene of the garments are improving? So all that is our scenarios we are building now and re-looking at what all needs to be done post. Especially also, do we need to operate with 100% manpower, because the business is not going to be there at 100% manpower. So we need to re-look at all that. I think shifts will purely depend on with the malls, because majority of our stores are in the shopping malls, and we will have to adhere to that. But I think the good part, I think we are working with the shopping malls. I think to start with, we could also only have one shift, because as we are seeing other part of the world, the demand is not going to 100% the day one. So typically the demand starts at about 30%, and then week on week it keeps going up. So I think we will have to work towards that. It needs to be a structured opening. I think a few of the high streets might open faster, because there you can still manage. The shopping malls are going to be a little more distant, the opening, but it purely will depend from state to state of how they react. And I think accordingly we'll have to play the game. And this is not about planning and sitting here. We can only plan scenarios. Every day you have to react with the new information that is coming in. Some of the information comes from the government, some information comes from the industry. So we are looking at every aspect of that. And I think, as we said, that we in the scenarios we have built, we've also built scenarios on when the stores open. So if 25% of business opens, what is the traffic we're going to get? How many people do we need to be in the store? Because we need to manage this social distancing. The new norm will be, how do we also make touchless payments? How do we ensure that the entire store upkeep is far better in terms of hygiene than it used to be? What happens if we get too many customers together? How do we manage that traffic to go into the stores? So I think there are going to be multifold new ways to look at, new things to look at before we do the opening. And I don't foresee the opening happening together at all. It's going to be several days, I think several weeks, in which 100% stores will get operationalized. I can give you example with China. 7,000 stores of ours opened over 3 weeks, because they also opened gradually. They did not open. So Wuhan just opened like now. We see that in Norway. We're seeing it in Sweden. We're seeing this in Denmark. So they're also opening partially. Shopping malls in a lot of places are not open. If you know, Germany said anything below 800 square meters is okay. Beyond 800 square meters is not open. Okay. So I think the similar norms will come into the country. And I think we should also be very aware, because we have to protect our employee health and the consumer health also. So I think we will have to be also a little more cautious on how do we open. I also wanted to add to what Dalpat had said about this of cash. And I think another way of looking at cash is to re-look at our business models. Look at the number of stores we really need to operate, because the business is not going to be of same scale as it used to be. So we need to re-look at that part also in terms of cash and requirement, because a lot of stores require cash to operate.
Good. So may I switch this to Shailesh? And I think you've got similar challenges. You've got to figure out, how do I actually manage when the market opens, when the lockdown is lifted? Should I again open all stores together? How do I plan for merchandise? And you've got long lead times in terms of the import of your merchandise. So how do you then plan to, what kind of commitments do I make? What quantities, what designs, and for what period of time? So Shailesh, if you could also dwell on the same subject.
Bijou, once the lockdown gets lifted in a staggered manner, I think what's important, we are in the business of customer service, right? So our customer has to feel safe. And I was looking at the way the districts are mapped as red, yellow, and green. Unfortunately, most of India's GDP is in the red zone. I mean, the way, the concentration of businesses are, it's all big cities, and all the big malls which do large business are all in those red zones. I wish they were a little more distributed. Then I would have said I'll open the green first and the yellow next, but that's not going to happen. But most of the business in the red zone, unfortunately, and unexpectedly, to be honest. And the way we have to work together with the malls is that we need to make sure that our customers feel safe when they come in. So the entry into the mall, entry into the store, all kind of precautions to be taken so that customer feels safe, that his or her health is not going to get jeopardized when they move to do some bit of shopping. We're going to make sure our team feels safe, not just about the customer. We need to make sure our employees feel safe as well, because they have concern about their health and safety as well. So I think the one word I would say is safety for the customers, for our team, and working together with the partners, whether it's a department store or with the mall or a high street franchisee, to make sure that we do everything possible to make customer and employee feel safe to work. Now, operationally, reduce shift hours to start with. While we are closing down, also we were looking at a shift which was around 12 p.m. till 5 p.m. Start with small shift. I don't know how many employees will come back. We need to also whether they'll get bookings to come. Most of the employees are also from other cities, so they've gone back home. How many of them will come back on first week of May? I don't know. So it'll be a staggered thing. We'll have to do a smaller shift to start with, lesser number of our own staff in the store to make sure that social distancing norms are applicable. Probably limit the number of customers that we allow into our stores, not more than 10 maybe. We need to go out of our way to reach out to our customers, and I think we should create videos on the same, send it to our CRM database. That's how a Tommy or a CK or Arrow store is looking, how safe it is, what are the methods we have done, not just sanitizers, but disinfecting number of times a day. If my wish list is that our store staff should be almost like, doctors, space suit and the mask and the glove. We need to really go out to make a statement on safety to our customers.
Yeah, I kind of understand where you're coming in from. It's a very uncertain situation. We've got to take all precautions. Nobody really knows, but we might have to look at new ways of working, as was suggested earlier, which is that, there is no need to look at the entire portfolio of stores. You might need to look at a portfolio rationalization, temporary or permanent. You might need to look at restrictions in terms of working hours, number of people in shifts, protection to all of the people. And I guess, it is a new kind of retail, which we haven't been used to. We've used to a cookie cutter model where it's a standard operating procedure which then gets replicated across all stores. But this is, of course, going to be a very, very different thing. Amrish, I'd, like to swing to you. And, you've got artisans who work with you, you've got workers who are part of the larger factory situation. What we are seeing around us, whether it's the US or Europe, what we have seen is support to every employee from the government. So whether it's in terms of, salary support, if people are laid off or if they are furloughed, whether it's in terms of providing an allowance to every individual, whether it's in terms of providing monies to businesses in order to help them to be able to manage their cost and to be able to support the people who work within. All of this has been done. But in India, so far, other than some circulars going around which talk about preserve employment as far as possible, which is more from an emotional perspective, there isn't really much that the government has done. So if you were to look at it from the perspective of being able to sit down and write a letter to the government saying that these are the things that I need you to do for me in order to help the apparel industry to survive, what are some of the points that you would certainly consider while writing this letter?
That's a good question. I think fundamentally, I believe that in the long term, you need to recreate employment as quickly as possible. And whatever you can do in order to do that will help your artisans and will help even non-artisans, will help every worker who's in the supply chain. And the recommendations I would have would be I don't think very different from many other industries, specifically to retail. As we've mentioned ad nauseum, cash is going to be king. There's going to be a requirement of credit periods to be extended. There's going to be a requirement of working capital to be extended. There's going to be a requirement of a little more flexibility and urgency in ensuring that businesses can get back on their feet. And if businesses can get back on their feet, their employees will get back on their feet. And I think that is critical. Now, that again is with the proviso that we are able to create an environment, as everybody else is saying, where people can actually participate in commerce. And now, whether that be shoppers in the mall or workers coming into factories. I mean, all of these need to be considered. But specifically, I think what we really need to look at is the impetus given primarily with businesses being able to get back on their feet with regards to cash. So the RBI needs to work very closely with the banks. There has to be a loosening up of what small and medium-sized businesses have access to, or even large-sized businesses have access to, so that there isn't such a crunch, there isn't such anxiety vis-a-vis their own employees. And once you can get employees back into work and to give yourself a little more breathing room into getting back to business as normal, is the best thing I think we can do for that segment of supply chain.
Good. Dalpat, if I were to ask you the same question, what would your version of the letter look like?
Uh,
Would there be any different? Would there be any additional points?
No, I have one or two additional points to this, Bijou. If I hear this entire thing now in the reopening of the business, the principle of treasury management will get applied out here also. Safety, liquidity, and returns. I think that is what going to become the order of priorities. First, to ensure safety of our consumers and people, then liquidity and returns. Now, to arrive at liquidity, any support that government can have. And as we know in our business, there are three large big heads. One on the lease cost, second is the payment of wages, and third is on the taxation, the pricing that consumer is paying for our products. In various countries across the world, governments have supported industries in one or the other part of it. In countries like Singapore, government has provided support by waiving the lease cost to the properties which were in their control, plus advisory which has been issued to the uh, property owners. Obviously, it has to be worked out in a way where the landlords and the mall owners, etc., also can safeguard their business by either having a moratorium, interest-free period, because their EMIs are also due. So that's one support which government can figure out. Second is on the wages, if there can be a co-sharing like Bangladesh has done, where they have provided a loan which is available to industries to pay only at a 2% interest rate, and that also with a moratorium and in installments. So anything of that sort, either there can be a co-sharing for minimum wages, or there can be a liquidity which can be provided to the business. And third part, to ensure that consumer demand comes in a big way, maybe on the GST. Today our industry pays anywhere between 12 to 18% depending on the products that we are looking at. If there can be a relief here on the GST, which can be passed on to the consumers, because one behavior change which will happen in consumers will be moved towards small price sensitiveness, right? Their cash flows will also be constrained for some time, so they will go towards small ticket things. They will also look at facilities which can be in installment payments, etc. So some parts we can do as entrepreneurs and industrialists, but some part government can also support us by providing some GST relief during this period.
Good. Thanks. Um, this entire experience for a lot of us has actually been a first time experience where we are seeing a combination of both, a health pandemic and an economic shock. And while the economic shock as of now has not been felt beyond the fact that we've got to preserve cash, it's only when the stores open up and we actually begin to see what the impact of all of this is going to be in terms of our business, will we understand the true impact of the economic shock. Way back in 2008, 9, 12 years back, we only went through an economic shock. We never really had a health problem at that stage. Uh, so, when you look at it from a consumer confidence perspective, I mean, if somebody were to tell me that if I catch coronavirus, that this is the way I can treat you and you will recover, I have no problem about catching it. If somebody were to tell me that I will vaccinate you and you will never catch coronavirus at all, I'm a lot more confident. But at this point of time, neither of the two is a reality. So, what are some of the changes that we should expect to see? And I'd like Vineet to start on this first. And I'd like each of you all to share what you think. What are some of the changes that you will see? Some of them might be temporary and some of them might be more permanent. But what kind of changes do you expect to see in the future when consumers start coming back to stores? Some of that might actually irreversibly change our own business models, and some of that might be things that we have to adapt to, but we might still lapse back to our old business models when the situation improves. So what would it be? So Vineet, if you could just start off on this, what I might define as a new normal.
I think the new normal is which we foresee is a lot more moving online because while we are locked down in the homes, we are getting so much used to this digital way of working. And I think I know a lot of people who were not so much digitally savvy earlier are now on online and they're browsing a lot of stuff. And I think that will become a new norm, and a lot of people will like to shop digitally. I think the other part which can become also a big thing, and I think that's where we have to work with the malls, is hyper local. No more people will like to wait for hours. We can service them for the nearest store without them going to the store by itself. So hyper local could become a very, very big norm. I can already see the likes of Swiggy's and Domino's moving and trying to deliver essentials. And I think there will be time when these people will start to deliver other products which are non-essential, because that will be closer. It will reach you in 2 hours and you don't need to even step out of your house. You can see it. And obviously in India, we have all kinds of services, cash on delivery, free exchanges, free returns. I think that's become already a norm. So I think that is going to help. So the local stores are going to become service centers rather than waiting for warehouses to ship those products out. So it was happening in bits and pieces, but it's become much more larger now. Also, I think what I foresee is there's going to be a new accessory line collection which we should look at. Masks are going to become new norms. I think that could be another thing which we could look at. I think that's another change of behavior because we're getting so much used to it. Earlier time, if you travel to Southeast Asia, you would see a lot of people in masks. But now I think across the globe, it's becoming a new norm. And I think that's going to be a new collection or a line which all businesses will look at or can look at. And I think the other thing which I think Dalpat also said, in the interim, in the short term, we're looking at a purchase going down. So I think we look at smaller baskets. I think much more products that you need today. The discretionary purchases for an interim, for short term, are going to be a challenge. I think Shailesh also had mentioned earlier. I think I see revival around Diwali. That's the first need, or the marriage season, or that, because by the time I think this huge lockdown, I think stress or mental trauma that we have will have also died down, and I think we would have started to become a little more free world. And I think that's when I think traction will become. And so in the interim, hyperlocal, all this will work, but I think we will come back to our new way of shopping by Diwali, hopefully by Diwali. If not, then I think spring 21 is where we see, unless we have another wave coming back, like something happening in China currently again. So then there's going to be a huge psychological change of behavior from a long-term perspective. But in the short term, I think it's about a little bit of purchase going down, and maybe hyperlocal and stuff happening, and online becoming a much bigger share to our business.
And Shailesh, would you like to add to that?
Your own few views? Changes I see. One is new respect for capital. Since the global financial crisis, quantity, QE, Bernanke principle, printing of notes, I think somewhere, capital became too easy and people started building museums. And, what we have seen in India also is people gone after growth through balance sheet, not through cash flows and efficiency. So this sudden, sucking up of the capital will bring in the respect for capital again, that, capital is scarce, things can go wrong, use it wisely. And this whole focus on growth at any cost versus now a little bit of capital efficiency will come in, and return on capital, all those parameters will become important. So I see newfound focus on efficiency of capital and respect for capital coming in. Second, I would say from the employee point of view, this whole cookie cutter approach in the industry won't work. So my message to employees or people in the industry was you have to be a domain expert in something. Be good at something small. You have to be among the best at some small, domain expertise in your city, in your company, in your country. You must stand for some skill. It can't be just, general industry person, but you should be very specifically well developed on some aspect of the business. Third is that I feel that this whole crisis is putting focus on working together as a team. So focus on ability to work with partners, and it's just not position of strength. I like the word position of strength. I've always said let's work with a position of strength in business, but I'm saying it's not just from position of strength, but position of empathy. So you have to, negotiate with the mall developers who are used to, how landlords behave, right? they don't care. But now they have to also care. If the brands fold down, 20% of a mall's tenants fold up, what's going to happen to the mall? Their survival will be at stake. They cannot behave like landlords going forward, or with government, or with your factory. So especially with government, I'm very keen to sit with a Niti Aayog or somebody in the government and say, let's create a festival during Diwali called Festival of India. Not about discounting, but let's get out of this doom and gloom and pessimism. We need colors, we need festivities, because one of the antidote to this problem is fall down of pessimism and growth of optimism. So government can play a role, and somebody like me, I can go and talk to the government and say, let's do a festival which brings in colors. And it's not about Diwali, one religion. I'm saying Festival of India. Let's make food and distribute Diwali food to all our neighborhoods, not just we're doing with the mask, etc. now, but let's do it for Festival of India in October. Let's go out and you play card. Can we do an online game of cards there which millions of people are playing, or Ludo is happening right now? We need to figure out a way. Can our Muslim friends send biryani to everybody that time? Can we all go out on a particular day and wear colors? Can we do a digital light and sound show? We need to infuse optimism, hope, color, positivity in the environment, so that the economy, the society, gets out of this sort of doom and gloom right now. So there is a lot of need to work together with the ecosystem, whether you call it negotiation or working together, deliberation. Those kind of skills will become very important going forward.
Good. Thank you. Amrish, if I were to swing that question to you, and as you look at the new normal in the future, it might be helpful to also reflect a little in a little more detail on products and pricing, and what are some of the implications that this change in consumer behavior might have as far as that is concerned.
Yeah. So the way we see it is that phase one is going to be a slow recovery, and that will start as soon as we open up. It's going to take a little bit of time, and we'll have to figure out how many shops we can open and so on and so forth. We just discussed it. The second phase is going to be a bounce, and I agree with Vineet. And already we are seeing in certain, little bits of news coming in about this need for consumers to go back to try and recreate some element of normalcy. We've been locked up for a long time. There will be move back to doing things that people used to do. The thing we have to be careful about is that it's not a dead cat bounce, and that is something that is that's a danger that is very possible in India, because phase three will be going back to a sort of the long-term demand curve. But if we just cast our minds back to before COVID, things weren't that great even then. We were having demand constriction across the economy. We were seeing changing consumer patterns. We were seeing slowness in uptake of discretionary goods, which we are all a part of. I think this is also, just on that, this is also a huge opportunity to kickstart something that we were dealing with before COVID. But there has to be some very enlightened and aggressive government-driven policies in order to make that happen. And whether that's along the lines of what I was saying or what Dalpat was saying, I think there needs to be an impetus in the economy. Of course, it has to be measured, but there is an opportunity here, and that's on the demand side. On the supply side, I think we've all mentioned, I think the basic paradigm of retail is going to change. I don't think the economic value that we have been ascribing thus far to physical locations, which then manifests itself in rents and things like that, will continue, not just in India, but I think across the world. Obviously, technology is an important part, and we've mentioned going online a few times in this conversation. And the one thing I want to highlight about the online shift is that in India thus far, to be fair, we are still online, we are still a value and discounted economy. We are not a full price economy. We're not China, we're not Europe, and we're not the US. And we just haven't got there yet. This could be one of those structural forces that pushes us to becoming more of a discretionary consumer set online that buys full price goods, etc., for the convenience of it, as opposed to for the for the value or the discount element in it. So that could happen. Again, that's anybody's guess. It will happen. How quickly, we don't know, right? As far as product is concerned, I agree with you. I think people will buy things to keep for longer. That has always been um, our thinking as a brand. So we do expect that, one, the top end of the market might temper. Um, we've been seeing that since demonetization. Actually, the top end of the market has tempered a little bit. Of course, there are people who still buy very expensive clothes, etc. But by and large, I think there has been some tempering in the right at the top end. Value for money is important, and how long clothes last, etc., will become more and more important. So I think those you make a good point about how consumer mindsets are going to change. But again, as I said, these are all conjectures. We don't know exactly where it's all going to go. We'll just have to wait and watch. So
Thank you.
that's my yeah.
Thanks. And Dalpat, if I may swing to you, I think we're running a little short on time.
Sure. So I just keep it short, Bijou. I think Vineet, Shailesh, and Amrish have covered almost all the points. If I can summarize it, at the back end, automation will take a front seat now in all the companies. On the consumer side, appointment-based selling will become more and more prevalent, either in form of online selling, in form of doing the sale in the store with a pre-specified time, with all the safety standards. Safety standard will not become a point of marketing; it will become a must-have and consumers' minimum expectation. And third thing, on the pricing front, I see luxury being available at affordable price will be an expectation in the mind of consumer, and we'll have to gear up and prepare for it.
Sure. So I think we've run out of our time slot. We've tried to address a lot of the questions from the participants on this webinar in the form of the questions I've asked you and the answers that you've provided to them. I'd like to thank all of you all for being a part of this. You all are all veterans of the apparel industry. You've been at the forefront of fashion. What you've done over a period of time has made the fashion industry what it is. Thank you very much for participating in this. As we always say, we look forward to the future with a lot of optimism, and we believe that the future is often going to be brighter than the present, which looks currently a little bleak. So thank you very much for participating, and thank you for all those who are viewing this show, and all the best to everybody. Stay
Thanks
safe.
a lot.
Thanks, Bijou.
Thank you. Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye.